Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to add the next 20 creature cards with mana values of 4 into our Momir Vig Cube. What's up, MTG BC? You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment in our ongoing Momir Vig Cube series. If you are unfamiliar with the goals or purpose of the series or just need a refresher, you can search in the description below for a link to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're down there skulking around in the description, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So for today, we got 20 creature cards with CMCs of 4 going in, and we're going to begin with an angel. Why not? It's Shalai, Voice of Plenty. She's a 3/4 with flying. It doesn't matter for planeswalkers because Momir Vig is all creatures all the time. So we're going to have to errata Shalai to just say we and other creatures we control have hexproof. Now, the hexproof may not seem like it's going to be overly valuable in a format that's all creatures all the time. No instant removal, no sorcery removal, no planeswalker or enchantment removal. But as you have seen, if you've been following along with this series the entire way, there are many creatures that can come into play with ETB or LTB triggers that could target a creature for removal, not to mention any activated abilities. So to have Shalai out there protecting our creatures and protecting ourselves, well, that's a pretty good bonus. Plus, she's got a 3/4 body that flies, and in the later game, as we have a big enough army, or we just want to try to go tall as opposed to go wide, we can throw 4 and 2 green into Shalai and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. There is a +1/+1 counter theme built into this cube, so it is possible that there could be other synergies that go along with Shalai's activated ability. Just make sure you're packing those forests in your basic land library, because without those 2 green mana, you are not going to be able to activate Shalai's ability. All right, creature number 2, we're going back to the days of Torment, the first and only Magic the Gathering set that was skewed completely to black. More black cards and black spells in that set than any other color in that set. So we have Shambling Swarm. We got a horror here that's a 3/3 that apparently is horrifying the camera. All right, when Shambling Swarm is put into the graveyard from play, well, when Shambling Swarm dies, we distribute 3 -1/-1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures. Those counters are removed at the end of turn. So when Shambling Swarm dies, we're going to do our very best to slap some -1/-1 counters on some creatures and get those creatures to die too, particularly because those counters are not going to stick around past the turn that Shambling Swarm dies. So this is a great way in which to thin the battlefield of our opponent's creatures, all by having Shambling Swarm hit the graveyard. All right, creature 3, we're going multicolored here, and we have Shrewd Hatchling. This is a 6/6 elemental for the investment of 4 mana into your Momir Vig Simic Visionary avatar. However, it's going to enter the battlefield with 4 -1/-1 counters. Duh, so we just invested 4 mana into a 2/2? Well, it could get better. We could pay a blue or a red mana, and Shrewd Hatchling cannot be blocked. So how can we get these -1/-1 counters off of Shrewd Hatchling? Well, whenever we cast a blue spell or whenever we cast a red spell, we can remove one of these -1/-1 counters. Now, every creature that's summoned from the Momir Vig Cube is done so randomly. So we can't pick, we can't choose to get a blue creature or a red creature. It's all going to be by the roll of the dice. So we have to just cross our fingers, sit back, and hope the randomness of life and the stars that could align with it could help to get these -1/-1 counters off of this elemental, because I'm going to be honest with you, sending a 6/6 unblockable into combat in a format where combat is the most likely path to victory, and opponents begin the game with 24 life just like we do, it's only going to take a matter of time before Shrewd Hatchling as a 6/6 with unblockability is going to knock opponents out of the game left and right. But, like we said with Shalai, make sure you're packing those islands or mountains in your basic land deck, because you need that colored mana to activate its ability. All right, creature 4 is a colorless creature. It is Signpost Scarecrow, a 2/4 vigilance, a 2/4 with vigilance, and we can pay 2 generic mana to add 1 mana of any color. So this is a great way in which to filter needed mana if we don't have the colors that we need fixed by our lands. So Signpost Scarecrow, although not going to be mistaken for a beater in any way, shape, or form, it does provide the value of helping to fix our mana if we need colors that our lands cannot provide. All right, reaching the 1/4 mark of this video, and we're going back-to-back colorless. Next, it's Silent Arbiter, a 1/5 that makes no more than 1 creature attack each combat and no more than 1 creature to block each combat. Of course, getting a copy of this on our side of the battlefield once summoned from the cube, it's going to be very, very battlefield dependent. We don't know. We have no idea how many creatures are going to be out in play at this time. This is going to be one of those we're just going to have to sit back and see what happens, because this could help us or this could hurt us. Silent Arbiter is an example of one of those creatures that we put into the cube that is not always going to be looked at as overly powerful or overly helpful. All right, creature number 6, our first mono blue edition of this video, we have Skatewing Spy. Here we have a 2/3 Vidalcan Rogue Mutant, back from the days of Ravnica Allegiance, and this creature has the Adapt To mechanic, which means if this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, we can put 2 +1/+1 counters on it by paying 5 generic mana and 1 blue. 5 and a blue for 2 +1/+1 counters, that does not seem overly good. But in Momir Vig, those late game mana sinks could be the difference between winning the game and losing it, particularly because of Skatewing Spy's second ability. Here, each creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. So if we're able to get a counter on this, now we provide the valuable evasion that we need to fly over our opponents and deliver 4 points of damage, or maybe more with any other +1/+1 counter synergies, all on the body of a 2/3 walker for the investment of 4 mana. All right, next creature is Mono Black, and we're going back to Scars of Mirrodin. It is Skin Render. We have a 3/3 zombie that when in ETBs, we're going to put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature. So this is kind of the exact opposite of Shambling Swarm that we were talking about earlier in this video. When this creature ETBs as opposed to dying, it gets to throw 3 -1/-1 counters on a creature, and those counters stick. More often than not, I think we're looking to pop off a troublesome or nuisance utility creature on the battlefield, maybe something that we can't block or something that might have protection from something else. Either way, Skin Render gives us the ability to get rid of a creature off of the battlefield, which in a format like Momir Vig could be very, very valuable because, let's face it, no instants, no sorceries, no spot removal like that. All right, next creature, our first mono red edition. We're going back to the original Innistrad block, with Skursdag Cultist. Yes, there it is, folks. We are back to original Innistrad. We have a 2/2 human shaman that we can pay a red mana and tap to sacrifice a creature, and Skursdag Cultist will deal 2 damage to target creature or player. Imperative it is to have those mountains in your basic land library so that you can activate this ability. Very, very powerful, particularly in a format that's without its spot removal spells. Skursdag Cultist also provides the potential for combat chicanery, because if we've got creatures that are heading to the graveyard, or we have opponents that are attacking opponents with other creatures, we could always interfere with those combat moves just by tapping a red mana, tapping her, sacrificing another creature, or sacrificing a creature. We could sacrifice her to herself, and we could definitely impact combat during every single turn, as long as she's untapped. All right, next creature, we're going back to multicolored, and we have Skymark Rock. Here we have a 3/3 flyer that whenever it attacks, we may return target creature defending player controls with toughness 2 or less to its owner's hand. This may not seem like a very powerful ability, but remember, all creatures that are summoned from the Momir Vig Cube are token copies that are put onto the battlefield. So if Skymark Rock bounces a token copy of a creature, that token copy of the creature will cease to exist. It's not like it's going back into the player's hand. It then gets exiled. It's gone. It ceases to exist. It's no longer part of the game. So depending on how many creatures our opponents control with toughness 2 or less, Skymark Rock, with its evasion, let's not forget about that, because we should be able to comfortably turn this bird sideways, send it into combat without it getting killed, and get rid of one of our opponent's creatures. This could be one of the most valuable 4-drops in the entire cube. Back-to-back multicolored creatures as we get to creature number 10. This time it's Skyrider Patrol. 2/3 Elf Scout, another flying creature. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we may pay a green and a blue mana. When we do, we put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature we control, and that creature gains flying until end of turn. A great creature to make sure that we can have as much evasion as possible on our side of the battlefield. But we got to make sure we have those forests and islands in the basic land library so that you can activate Skyrider Patrol's combat ability. Back to mono red when we begin with creature number 11. It is Skyship Stalker, another flying creature, this one another 3/3. And we can pay a red mana to give this creature +1/+0 until end of turn. So here we have a dragon with the very, very valuable fire breathing. It's only going to be valuable depending on how many mountains you can tap, so do not forget to put those in your basic land library. We can also pay a red mana to give it first strike, and we can pay a red mana to give it haste. So if we're fortunate enough to have other mana sources available to us, and one of them is red, as soon as we conjure a copy of this from the cube, we could give it haste and send it right into combat. Next creature, going back to mono black, we have Sling Gang Lieutenant, a 1/1 goblin that when it ETBs, we create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. In a format like Momir Vig, having creatures that can create other creatures, very, very valuable. We can sacrifice a goblin to have target player lose 1 life, and we gain 1 life. There are other goblin support cards in the cube. There are lots of other goblins available as well. If you're fortunate enough to string a bunch of them together, Sling Gang Lieutenant could be one of those cards that could bring us to victory if there's enough goblins on our side of the battlefield. It ETBs and makes 2 tokens, so we could swing 2 life right there, and plus it says sacrifice a goblin, so we could sacrifice the lieutenant to its own ability. Back-to-back mono black cards. Next is Slum Reaper, A 4/2 that when it ETBs, each player sacrifices a creature. So this is the Merciless Executor. This is the other zombies that when they come into play, each player sacrifices a creature. Those are majority 3 CMC. Here we have a 4. So outside of being able to force our opponents to sacrifice one of their creatures, most likely we're sacrificing this because it provides no evasion and nothing else. It's just another creature that highlights the point of the cube that not every creature is going to be uber helpful, even though the forced sacrifice could be at the time it comes into play. If on curve it comes down on the force slot, it could provide a lot of help. Another mono black creature, this time it is Smogsteed Rider. It's a 2/2 human wizard, and whenever it attacks, each other attacking creature gains fear until end of turn. Evasion. For those of you who don't know what fear is, any creature that has fear can only be blocked by black or artifact creatures. There's no guarantee that our opponents will have black and or artifact creatures on their sides of the battlefield. So if you're fortunate enough to summon a copy of this to your side of the battlefield, you may have enough power in the tank to continuously send that creature into play and make sure that you can connect with your other creatures for combat damage with fear. It doesn't get fear itself, and as a 2/2, you got to be careful who you're sending that creature towards so that you don't end up losing it in combat. All right, next creature up is a mono red. It is Smothering Werewolf. It is a 3/2, and when it ETBs, it deals 1 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. So any dorks, maybe mana dorks or utility creatures with toughnesses of 1, Smoldering Werewolf can come down and pop off 2 of them, which is very, very powerful. We can also, in the late game, pay 4 and 2 red mana to transform this. Again, only if you have those mountains in your basic land library. And when we transform this werewolf, we get Erupting Dreadwolf, a 6/4 that whenever it attacks, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. That direct damage is very, very valuable in this kind of format, and a 6/4 body, that's pretty strong too. Smoldering Werewolf could be one of those sneaky, sneaky good cards from the 4 spot. Next up, we have creature number 16. It's another colorless creature. Here it is. It is Snare Thopter. It's a 3/2 with flying and haste. So it can hit the battlefield and attack right away, and it has that oh-so-valuable evasion. Very, very good card, especially because of the haste and the evasion, and it can go as soon as it touches down onto the battlefield. Next up, back-to-back colorless creatures, we have the Solemn Simulacrum. It's a 2/2. When it ETBs, you're going to search your library for a basic land, you're going to put it on the play tapped, and when this guy dies, you're going to draw a card. It's going to do everything for you. It's going to fix that mana. It's going to put another land into your hand when it dies, because, of course, our library is nothing but basic lands. Next up, another mono blue edition, we have the Soratami Mirror Mage. It's a 2/1 flyer that we can pay 3 generic mana and return 3 lands we control to our hand, or to their owner's hand, and then we can return target creature to its owner's hand. So those lands going back to our hand may seem like a detriment, but remember, each time you activate your Simic Visionary Avatar, each time you attempt to summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube, you must discard a land card from your hand to do so. So having Soratami Mirror Mage on our side of the battlefield gives us a way in which to put lands back into our hand, giving us the fodder that we need to toss those lands into the graveyards to summon more creatures. And in this way, we get to bounce the biggest threat that's on the battlefield. And remember, it's a token copy of the creature, so the token copy will end up dying. Soratami Mirror Mage provides a lot of versatility in the 4 spot. All right, 2 creatures left, and we're going blue, blue, blue here. Next up, it is Soulsworn Spirit. It's a 2/1 that's unblockable, so that's the perfect kind of evasion, because nothing's going to engage it. And when it ETBs, we can detain target creature and opponent controls. If you don't remember the detain mechanic way back from the time of Return to Ravnica, that means until our next turn, that creature cannot attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So pretty much Soulsworn is going to come down, and it's going to completely neuter one of our opponent's creatures until the beginning of our next turn. Plus the 2/1 unblock ability, very, very strong. Maybe not as strong as creature number 20 in this video, and that is Sower of Temptation, a 2/2 with flying, so there's that evasion. But when it ETBs, we gain control of target creature for as long as Sower of Temptation remains on the battlefield. So unlike what Soulsworn Spirit does by detaining a creature, we just completely gank one of our opponent's creatures, and as long as the Sower remains on our side of the battlefield, we get to do whatever we want with that creature because it's going nowhere but on our side of the battlefield. And there you have it, MTG BC. 20 more creature cards with a CMC of 4 jammed into our Momir Vig Cube. Let me know in the comment section below which are your favorites. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.